Many anglers stop fishing this time of year due to the cold weather because they think wintertime fishing is not worth it. In today's video, I am going to tell you these 5 tips to catch more bass on the jig in the winter. Following these 5 simple tips will help you have more confidence fishing a jig in the wintertime and potentially catching your next personal best bass. The bass you catch while fishing a jig in the wintertime will make braving the cold well worth it, I promise. One of the most important things to consider when fishing in the wintertime with a jig is the size of it. Jig size is important because you are wanting to imitate whatever the bass are feeding on for that day in your local body of water. If you are wanting to catch huge bass, you should throw a larger profile jig to attract a larger bass to bite. Bass will not feed as often this time of year, so a larger profile jig will imitate a larger size meal. By imitating a larger size meal, the bass will think it is a quick and easy big meal, and the bass will not be able to resist sucking it down. A good way to think about jig size is generally throwing a larger size jig will weed out more of the smaller fish compared to using a smaller size jig. If you are wanting to catch more bass, you should throw a smaller size jig though. A smaller size jig can entice the most hesitant of bass to bite your jig by thinking your jig is a quick and easy meal. I'm not saying that smaller jigs will not get big fish. It just really depends on what the bass are feeding on for that day and the size of what they're feeding on. I have caught some huge fish on finesse style jigs when larger profile jigs would not produce a bite for me. Also, at the same time, I have caught massive bass fishing a larger profile jig when nothing else would get bit for that day. It really depends on what the bass in your local body of water are feeding on for that day, and like I said, the size too. Let me know down below if you like throwing a larger profile jig for the potential to catch a massive bass, or if you like using a smaller jig to get more bites. I'm actually pretty curious to see what you guys have to say. Trailer selection is important in the wintertime because you want to imitate the behavior of the forage in your local body of water. Most of what the bass feed on during the winter are more lethargic this time of year because the forage will want to conserve as much energy as possible. This means that no aquatic creatures will be moving around quickly, and you want to imitate that with your trailer. A trailer with less action will thrive in the wintertime, and you will get more bites than using a trailer with more action. Your trailer will look more realistic to how the forage in your local body of water are acting when the water temperature is low. Some of my favorite trailers to use this time of year are the Strike King Rage-Tailed Chunk or the Gary Yamamoto Hula Grub. The Strike King Rage-Tailed Chunk is my favorite trailer to use when I am wanting to go with a more compact profile and wanting the jig to fall slower in the water column. The Strike King Rage-Tailed Chunk also does not have much movement in the water, which bass cannot resist this time of year. By using these, you will be able to closely resemble the forage in your local body of water and how they are acting this time of year. I like to use a Gary Yamamoto Hula Grub when the bass are not wanting to bite a Strike King Rage-Tailed Chunk. There's just something about this subtle action that the Gary Yamamoto Hula Grub produces that drives the bass crazy. I started using the Hula Grub last winter and I caught some huge bass using this as a trailer, and I also caught a lot of fish at the same time, even though it's a larger profile. If you have never tried any of these trailers, make sure you do. Also, let me know if you have tried the Hula Grub in cooler water before. Let me know down below. Color selection is important this time of year because it will determine how many bites you get. Many bass in the wintertime will feed on the bait fish in your local body of water and not feed as often on crawfish because a good majority of them will be hibernating. If you get lucky and have a warmer day compared to the normal wintertime temperatures and the sun is beating down on the bank, the crawfish will burrow out and take in some of the sunshine. The bass know this and will feed heavily on them. This is a good time to throw a jig that is green pumpkin with a little bit of brown in it or a solid brown jig. A green pumpkin jig does well when trying to imitate a bluegill or other bait fish in your local body of water. I use a green pumpkin jig a majority of the time when targeting winter bass because of how it imitates a lot of different forages in the water. The last color I use this time of year is a black and blue jig. A black and blue jig is good when the water is muddy due to a heavy rain. A black and blue jig creates a nice silhouette in the water when water visibility gets bad. I also sometimes change it up and throw a black and blue jig in clear water because many people will not think to throw that color in clear water. water. I will do a video in the future explaining this more in depth. This time of year, it is important to fish your jig slow because the bass are not moving around as much and are more lethargic in colder water. By slowing down, you're able to greatly increase your odds of catching a massive bass. You will be able to pick apart a spot easier when fishing slow, and you will be in the strike zone longer. During the wintertime, the bass do not feed as much compared to the warmer months due to their metabolism being much lower due to the colder water temperatures. This means that a bass will not use as much energy to chase down your jig, and why it is important to slow down. I like to fish my jigs as slow as possible this time of year when the water temperature is very low. A good helpful tip: if you think you are fishing a jig slow, fish it even slower. This will better imitate the forage the bass are feeding on. I promise you will get many more bites by doing this because you will better imitate the forage the bass are feeding on. When fishing a jig in the wintertime, one of the most important things to consider is the jig weight. When the water temperature gets cold, it is crucial to use as light of a jig as possible while still maintaining bottom contact. You want to use as light of a jig as possible while still maintaining bottom contact due to how lethargic the bass are in the wintertime. Also, using a lighter jig will not get hung up as much on the bottom. That means not as many tree pounders. Normally this time of year, the heaviest jig I will use is a 1/2 ounce. This is whenever I'm fishing really deep water and I am wanting to maintain bottom contact as much as possible. However, most of the time I will use a 1/4 ounce due to the slower fall rate that better imitates the forage the bass are feeding on. Generally, using the lightest jig you can get away with will better resemble how the forage acts and moves throughout the water column. I promise if you fish as light of a jig as possible in the wintertime, you will catch a lot more bass compared to using a heavy jig that does not imitate the forage as well. So we have gone over jig size, trailer selection, slowing down, jig color, and jig weight. Following these 5 tips will help you maximize your efficiency on the water. This is one of my favorite techniques to use when the water gets cooler and will produce some good quality bites for you and potentially your personal best bass. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button to help the video and the YouTube algorithm so more people can get recommended this video. If you are not subscribed, I would love to have you join the channel. I plan on doing more of these videos like this in the future, releasing one every Tuesday and Thursday. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time.